Rolling.
Hello, attendees to the online panel discussions of the Jazz Journalists Association. This is the umpteenth panel discussion we've had, and this one is going to be on digital downloads and their appropriateness for reviewing the technological changes that are making them desirable. We're going to try to get the musician's point of view, the label's point of view, and the point of view of Robert Bartosh, who's the CEO of Radio Submit, which is a concern that actually is doing a lot of downloading, offering downloads for listeners as well as journalists, of course. So let's first introduce the panel. Jason, will you say something about why you're here tonight?
Okay, my name is Jason Huang. I'm a composer, violinist. I'm involved in producing my own CDs and working with labels also for production. But I think today's discussion we can talk about the role of digital downloads in the overall economics of creative production and the issues that face musicians with these changes in cultural practices and how our music is distributed and sold and shared.
Thank you. Joyce Pagani from Cuneiform Records.
Hi, I'm with Cuneiform Records, in charge of the promotion and publicity department here at the label. We've been a label since 1984, which is quite some time ago. Since then, we've released, I believe it's 370 albums. In recent years, there are a lot of changes in the industry, and some of those changes have to do with electronic promos, and that's why I'm talking here today.
Thank you for being with us. And finally, Robert Bartosh.
Yes, I'm Robert Bartosh. I'm founder and CEO of Radio Submit. We're one of the first in the world to offer online digital distribution to radio stations around the globe. We have now probably, we're approaching 6,000 confirmed signed up radio stations that use our service, and we actually deal with about 30,000 radio stations worldwide. We offer digital distribution to those stations in order to save artists shipping and cost of CDs and things like that.
Thank you very much. And Robert, are you speaking from Utah today?
Yes, I'm in our Moab, Utah office.
And Jason, you're in Jersey City?
Yep, Jersey City, New Jersey, right across from Manhattan.
And Joyce, are you in Silver Springs? Or?
Silver Spring, which is right on the Washington, D.C. line.
I should say also I'm Howard Mandel. I'm president of the Jazz Journalists Association, and thank you all for being panelists tonight. So Jason, let's hear a little bit of your take on why you instigated this discussion and what you think is important about the incorporation of digital downloads into the musician's practice and listener's practice.
Well, I know it came out of, we had kind of had I called you up with some ideas, and we had a good impassioned exchange about digital downloads and reviewers accepting them and stuff. So I really appreciate you, then taking our conversation and making it a panel, because I think each of us will have a unique perspective. I recently read, or I've been reading Richard Reich, his book Beyond Outrage. Richard Reich was, I think, the Treasury Secretary under Clinton.
Robert Reich.
Is it Robert? Okay. It was an amazing statistic when he talks about the change in our economy, when he says that the 400 richest Americans now have more wealth than the entire bottom half of earners. That is 150 million Americans put together. And that's astonishing to really just consider that. So what we're looking at is that the size and the purchasing power of the middle class has decreased, and coincidentally with technology the devaluation of music has increased. The demand for music remains strong, and there's opportunities and there's changes that I think we musicians are facing in the face of it. The opportunities, I kind of was influenced by Chris Anderson's long tail theory, in which he said in this age, there are a lot more niche goods which would be jazz, than the traditional mega hits of pop music. And that with the internet and digital files, our audience, which might be, say, small locally, now becomes expanded beyond geography, becomes international, so that the jazz market then isn't defined by geography but by interest. And so we have to find ways to drive people through all that mass of the internet to our music. And there's possibilities now for live streaming of concerts, which could, there's some services that are doing that for a fee. There's, of course, the free YouTubes, which doesn't produce income. There's also pay-per-view type YouTube services coming out. So I think those are new possibilities for us. Our music is more accessible because as digital files, we don't take up any retail space. So stores that got to produce a certain amount of money per square footage of display space, that's not a concern now. And so then on iTunes, you can have such zillions and zillions of tracks. So access to our music is there. I was talking to Connie Crothers, and she was telling me in the early 60s that it was very hard to find a Charlie Parker LP. And that was kind of sort of stunning to me. So we don't have that problem anymore. Our music is going to be accessible. And then also we have to kind of recognize our power, because even though most jazz releases don't sell the big numbers, as an aggregate, our total creative production, it aggregates into a significant market. So we have something, if we organize together, we have some economic might to influence the overall discussion. So I think those are the positive things. I think the negative things is that, for example, I think the streaming services is going to really kill CD sales. I mean, it's going to damage CD sales, and of course the royalties are a pittance. For example, Pandora is paying 11/100ths of a cent per stream. Spotify's paying, they won't publish it, but depending on the level of service, if it's paid or subscription free, or if it's subscription, it's a half to 0.7 cents per stream. So it's really quite minimal, and these companies are growing exponentially, and you know, artists aren't really seeing much income from it. And the thing about this beginning is pretty soon, you know, internet access will be ubiquitous. It will be in that it won't, the costs will come down. Cars will be internet capable. So here's where for people of a certain age, where it's a bitter pill that we have to adapt to, is before, when you listen to music on radio, it was an ephemeral experience. You heard it, and if you wanted to hear it again, you'd have to go find that recording and buy it. But now with streaming, especially like Spotify or something, it's not ephemeral. It's always there. You can access it like your library. And so that's not going to drive the traditional sales to a record store or something like that. So that's a huge change in the dynamic. So one thing I wanted to talk about today in a little more detail is then for jazz to survive with these changes, we have to find ways to make our productions really efficient and bring the cost of production down. And one aspect of that is in promotion, which I'm sure Joyce and Robert can speak much more detail to, is you know, if we don't have to send physical CDs to radio stations and to press, that's a huge cost saving. And I'll go into that a little more detail later with a sample budget.
Okay, well, let's try to move. Thank you, Jason. Let's try to move on to Joyce. Since from a label perspective, how does that landscape that Jason has described look to you?
It's very accurate. We have, as far as being international, we've always been international as a label. But since 1984, there have been a ton of changes. There wasn't an internet back then. In order for us to contact a magazine overseas, an editor of a magazine, a radio station, I would write a letter. It would take 2 weeks to get there. They would write me back. It would take 2 weeks to get back. It was just a whole different landscape. The internet, when it came up, initially it was absolutely wonderful. It was almost like it was made for us. We could do anything internationally immediately. However, it's been both a blessing and it's been a curse. On the one hand, you have much more potential to reach everybody around the world. On the other hand, there's much more noise out there that you have to cut through. As far as what Jason was saying about budget, the internet is great. Electronic promos are a great way for us to reach people overseas or in the U.S. So that's a very good thing. There are different responses for how people, whether or not people want to get the electronic promos.
Can you talk just a little bit about that, and then we'll move over to Robert?
Sure. What I did is I looked at my press list. We have, and we do a ton of jazz, but we also do avant-garde music, creative music outside jazz. So we have about 3,000 press contacts, about 700 North American radio contacts, and about 550 overseas radio contacts. I started keeping track recently about who wants, and this is a very incomplete summary, but who only wants physical CDs, who only wants an electronic promo, and who's equally good to both. And as I said, I just started keeping these records, so it's only part of my list. But it's interesting, the people who insist on, out of the people that I've asked recently who insist on physical CDs, it's equally split, about how many who take physical CDs, how many who only want the electronic, and the people who are equally good at both. But I'm talking about, out of this survey I just started doing, I'm only talking about 100 people for each, not all of those thousands of people that I mentioned to you. So right now we're in a changing landscape where people aren't committed completely to the physical and they're not committed completely to the electronic. There are pluses and minuses, they tell me, for both. I don't know if you want to ask me anything else as far as...
Well, I guess the only thing I'd ask you is, are you seeing a break in editors from reviewers or programmers? Can you break that out of that?
Sure. As far as every time we come out with new releases, I see changes in the press worldwide. There are fewer print magazines, there are more electronic magazines. What's really interesting to me is that some magazines, electronic magazines, don't want electronic promos. Initially they were accepting, I know this very, initially they were accepting electronic and asking for electronic promos. But some of them now have gotten too many electronic promos, so they're now saying we want physical instead. Once again, small proportion. In general, as far as editors, magazine editors, they prefer the physical promos. That's right now, and everything keeps changing every day. However, if they want something fast, then they want the electronic promo. As far as the journalists go, there are some journalists, younger journalists, who are very excited about the electronic promos. There are, at the same time, other young journalists who, and this is part of the economy that's coming into the music business now, young journalists who tell me that they don't get paid for their writing. The only compensation they get is the physical CD that I give them. They're writing for various online magazines. So everything is split. It's still really fluid. As far as radio goes, radio, and Robert may have, I mean, he has much more insight about different aspects of it, but from my point, the radio I'm seeing so far, most people want the physical CD, not the electronic yet.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just my personal experience.
Mm-hmm.
Joyce, could you tell us a little bit what exactly is in an electronic promo? Is it all the tracks of the CD plus photos?
Yeah, the ones that we have now, there are several different companies that do electronic promos, and one of them is Holix. SoundCloud does some electronic promos. Right now we are working with Bandcamp, and they're doing electronic promos for us. Part of the reason that we're working right this moment with Bandcamp is, you know, it's a great company, and B, for us it's economical. As I said, we have 370 releases out. We promote all of our new releases, but we also promote our back catalog. Something, if you're on the label, we try to keep that album alive forever, for as long as we possibly could. So with Bandcamp, we could economically create electronic promos for our new releases and still keep our electronic promos for our back catalog. So that, for instance, Howard, let's say you're writing an article and you want something that we release because it has to do with the artist that you're writing about. Something that we released 6 years ago, we could send you that electronic promo as well as the brand new release that you might be interested in.
I see. Robert, you came in obviously identifying a niche, and I wonder if you'll talk a little bit about how you set up Radio Submit. What you had in mind as a mission for the company?
Let me go back a little bit. We also own Roots Music Report, and we track radio airplay. We have disc jockeys that report to our charts. We've added jazz about 2 years ago. From doing Roots Music Report for the last 15 years, about 6.5 years ago, DJ called me. He was a blues DJ, and he says, Robert, he says, you've got a blues artist on your chart. He's number 4. And he said, I can't find his CD. He said, we try to play with what you guys are charting. He said, I cannot find it. It's on an indie label. I've looked everywhere on the internet, and I can't find it. And about 5 minutes later, another radio station called me and said, Robert, you have a folk CD on your folk chart. And do you know where I might be able to buy a CD or find this? And that's what made me, light went on, and I said, wait a minute, why can't artists load up their music CD quality, wave quality, and radio stations get a password and download it? And that's where this started. And once I started launching the site, then I got to thinking, wait a minute, this is going to save so much money, because the average, and I'm not talking about record label, I'm talking, you know, we deal a lot with indie music and the small musicians that are out there trying to do their own thing and trying to get a hold, because it's difficult to get into a label and get their support. But what I thought, wait a minute, I said the average, let's just pick a genre, let's just pick blues. artist will go spend $5,000 to record his CD. He'll spend, you know, so much for 8 by 10 pictures. His stamps, his envelopes, his time, and then he'll mail to, let's just say, 500 radio stations. And if he doesn't have a record promoter for $3,000 on board or a label behind him, and he mails to 500 radio stations, he's going to be very lucky if he gets played on 4 of them. So he took, you know, well over 400 CDs and all his promotion material at almost, well, let's say $2.50 here in the United States, almost $4 in Canada for them to mail a CD to radio. That's a lot of money just thrown out in the street, you know. And so that's where Radio Submit has come in. And Joyce was right about the response from radio. It's been a long haul. When we first started 6 years ago, I'd call radio up at some of these country stations, and I'm not saying just country and bluegrass. We do a lot of the small genres. You would call a disc jockey up, and he says, well, I don't even have a computer here. You know, we got a CD player, but, you know, so and we'll never take that. We got to have a CD in hand. And then I used to relate. I was an artist myself for years, and I remember when I was releasing a 45 vinyl, and right in the middle of my release on the 45, this thing called a CD player came out, and I was told immediately by a lot of the bigger stations, you've got to have a CD. And I went, what are you talking about? Well, we need CDs. That's what we're going to be playing. And then I'd go back to the older stations, some of the old guys, and they said, no, we don't like that CD. It's too crisp. You don't get the full effect like you do analog. So it just goes on and on and on. And CDs are going to go by the wayside. There's no doubt about it. It may be 3 years. It may be 5. It may be 2. We're working on some things now that are well, I don't want to get into it, but we're going to help this digital distribution for labels and radio and bring a lot of things together here shortly with some new ideas we've had and we've been working on for about a year that are going to help a lot of this. And it's a lot of the DJs, I have to say here, jazz, classical, and world genres are our toughest for radio. We launched Radio Submit presenting nothing but lossless wave files, which is a CD quality music, and immediately we were called by Clear Channel engineers and said, look, we need MP3s. That's what our Clear Channel network plays, and we'd like to have 192 bit rate. We said, no, we're not going to give you that. We're, you know, because we've already hearing from other radio stations about quality, so we'll give you MP3s, but we're going to keep it at 320 bit rate. So anyway, that's gone on, but radio and labels and artists are all having to adapt very quickly. And jazz has been one of the slowest genres to come along with us, but just this week I've signed up, probably another 20 radio stations have signed up to Radio Submit because they're facing the facts as the younger crowd comes in here and starts managing radio stations, becoming disc jockeys and things like that. They love the digital music. They're the ones driving this. And as a matter of fact, like radio station KSDS out of San Diego, a jazz station, signed up this morning. I've been approaching them for several years, and they no, we only want physical. Well, they just now signed up to Radio Submit to download some music. So it's all coming around. And I think it's just going to accelerate.
Excuse me for a minute. I got a question asking if it was too early to ask questions. This is from our attendees. It's not too early to ask. Type your questions in. I may hold the question until I feel like it's appropriate to enter into the conversation. But I'd like to see the questions, and then I'll have them queued up, and we'll try to get to everybody's questions. Robert, can you tell me what is the business model for Radio Submit, though? Who is paying the freight?
We charge the artist $29.95 per month to load as many songs, as many tracks, all their promo information, 2 videos, everything they want to present to radio, just like they were sending a press kit. Radio stations log in. It's completely free for all radio stations. Radio stations come to Radio Submit. They don't even need to log in. They browse, they find the music, or they're contacted by the artist or a promoter and says, hey, You're in Africa and we have a new release. Do you want it right now? We released it today. Africa can be playing that song within 5 minutes after the phone call. But they go in, they sample the music. We only allow them to sample 2 minutes because unlike YouTube and some of the others, we don't want people keeping that high-res quality at their home, because there are programs that can go into YouTube and just download the music all day long. And so we only allow the DJ to listen to 2 minutes to get a sample. If he likes it, he downloads it and plays it on the station. It's just that simple, just like receiving a CD.
And consumers do not have access to the music.
No, only radio stations have a password and can download the music. Consumers can listen to samples, but they cannot download, only radio.
And print journalism has no place in this either, right?
Well, they could have. That would be very easy to set up if they were interested. But this is coming here shortly, where print journalists will be very interested in what we're doing here shortly.
Jason, does this sound like a kind of model that you want to work with?
It sounds very interesting, especially if it expands into print. You know, I was thinking, as I was listening to both Joyce and Robert, about a talk that Steve Smith, the critic for Time Out, gave a talk at Chamber Music America. And, you know, the response, first of all, like, over 200 people attended this. And I thought, wow, all these people are trying to get to this guy so that he'll listen to their music and read their press release and all that. And he said that because people are sending him so much stuff, and I'm sure you can attest to this too, Howard, people send you a lot of stuff, he actually preferred getting electronic you know, downloads and press packages simply because he could keep track of it better. It was an issue of storage, and where is everything? You know, because, you know, they just, you know, you could find stuff quickly and respond to it a lot easier. Now, contrary to that, I was talking to Kyoko Kitamura, who's doing the internet outreach for Anthony Braxton's Tricentric Foundation, and Anthony's very interesting because he's releasing a lot of stuff digitally. And there was one radio station, I think WFMU, which loves his music, and they would take the digital downloads, but they would burn them to CDR for their library. And I thought that was kind of an interesting anecdote, because it shows, like, even that, it's, I guess, a college station, the station directors, I guess, the programmers, and their DJs, they communicate via the CD. You know, they don't have a way of communicating with files like, you know, of listen to this, or this is where you find such and such. You know, they don't have that database set up, and they don't broadcast from a computer. So I think, now Howard, I mean, is just a practical issue? Is storage an actual issue for, like, especially you have written all these years? You must have like a giant warehouse of stuff.
I do. You know, and storage certainly is an issue, going to be more and more of an issue every day. I mean, I just don't know really what to do. I have more CDs than I would ever be able to listen to. I'm not going to live long enough, you know. And sometimes I'm tempted now when somebody says, "Can I send you my CD?" to say yes, but please send me an hour so I have time to listen to it.
Right. Well, one thing we talked about in our phone conversation, and maybe Robert has an idea when you mentioned about his service for press. I mean, one of the things facing, like, an independent producer or artist, self-producing, and there's so many of us doing that, one of it is, like, how do we reach the press? And, you know, it's not, there's a lot of writers where I've looked for specific writers trying to get their emails somewhere online or something, and I can't find it. And it's a lot of labor to try to build your own press list. That's why I'm so impressed with Joyce's list of 3,000 people.
It's not all jazz.
Right,
there are
okay.
other people, and some of those that there might be some A couple of different people for the same magazine, so yeah,
Right.
that's a rough figure. That's just like looking at the number, and it's literally taken decades to
Yes.
do that.
But this is what, promotions and publicity people have taken as the coin of the realm. I mean, you're only as good as your mailing list as far as that goes. That's been part of the value. And I know, Jason, you'd like to see a way to
Yeah.
automate or filter or, deliver to people what they want. And we had talked about this. I was saying a lot of people don't know what they want until they hear it.
Right.
And, you don't want to exclude anybody either, so that becomes very difficult. I would say, though, back to your other point, and I have a question for you, too, that it's very difficult. I find it as difficult to organize my online music as new CDs that are coming in. And at one point, I used to be able to alphabetize CDs that came in. I had a wall that was big enough to hold them all, and
Right.
I could try to alphabetize them there, but that no longer is the case. And I'm just losing things right and left. So,
Well, here's the case as far as looking at the overall process that's between musician or label and the critics community is because so much of this process you're describing is analog and the inefficiencies of analog. I mean, there has to be a way that, and it has to be advocated that the information, say, for example, of writers is in a database and that it's easy to access, and that the cultural practice is that digital files are accepted because there's an understanding of the overall economics of creative production. It's a supportive thing to do for creative, non-commercial music. And also it's the speed of getting things to people. It can be very efficient with a database and all that. And then I think then there's a worry that you guys will get too much stuff. And that's what Chris Anderson in the long tail theory is. This is like the whole big industry in creative technology is the filter. I mean, how do we know who to send it to, and how do you filter out what you don't want to have? It's a mutual interest. And so it's the filters that are now in place for consumers is, well, you have Google, you can Google names, you have listener recommendations, you have listener reviews, you have bloggers, and you have the traditional press. But somehow I think it can be harnessed in a way as efficient as what Robert's doing for radio. If that were done for press, it would bring down the costs of promoting the music a lot. And somewhere, wherever you feel it's right, I thought probably everyone on the panel is familiar with these numbers, but I'm not sure who's attending the webinar. But I wanted to give an example of exactly how much it costs to produce a CD, and how much how much it costs to publicize it on a small scale. Oh, I just clicked on show my screen. Should I do that?
sure.
All right. So I'll try to go through quickly. Say you want to record a quartet. Say you want to do this one CD, 5 or 6 tunes. You're going to try to do that in 10 hours. Now that's most people are doing something like that. They'll do those 10 hours in a one-day long session because they can't schedule people, or they'll just split it over 2 days. All right, so if the musicians are paid $500 per day or $1,000 for the CD, I don't even think that's union pay, and that's very rare that people can afford that amount to pay a band unless you have support, like say from Chamber Music America. So say you pay the band pays $2,000, and they all talk about the democratic effect of technology with the cost of production. It's true to an extent. Say, for example, if you went to a top studio in the old days, and you wanted in their rack, you would see high-end compressors, equalizers, reverb units. It might be like $100,000 worth of equipment. Now if you buy a package from Wave plugins for Pro Tools or for any other of these music programs, you could probably get that whole package and the highest level of technology for about $1,000. So in that sense, it probably helped music production. But I would have to say for jazz, maybe not so, because the music is recorded acoustically. You need a good studio with a good room, a drum booth, good monitoring systems. And so say you pay $100 an hour for a studio like that. And they can vary. You can find places that are 50, you can find places that are 200, but say 100. And then you hire a mixer. I've done a lot of film work, so I do my own mixes, so I trained myself to do that. But if you hire a freelance mixer, I'm not sure they take it as a package rate now. Say they spend 40 hours on a CD, which is really not that long. You could spend a heck of a lot of time mixing up a CD if you decide not to use certain engineering shortcuts like compression, which is really not good for acoustic music. So okay, so now your recording is $5,000 there. Now if you press a CD 1,000, which a lot of musicians commonly do, you have to master the music. It'd be 500 to 1,000, depending on the engineer, the design, graphic design, liner notes, the actual manufacture of CDs, shipping to your home. There's another 3,000. Now, if you hire a publicist, for those who can afford it, their prices are all over the map. I've heard high-end publicists can be $10,000 a week or something. There's this one ballpark figure. Say you spent $3,000, and then all the postage and all that. So then labor, and this is only for say sending out 500 press packages between radio and press. So that's another $4,600. So now, on that budget, it's $12,775 for 1,000 CDs, and you want to sell them for $15, or a lot of people want to see it for $10. You can see it's pretty crazy. You really can't make much money. You can bend that cost down by doing your own promotion, or you can do cheaper studio. The band gets paid less. You start bending that cost to about $7,000 or $8,000. It's still it's small, and so.
Well, we understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So that's what I was saying. In this area of the promotion of getting our music out, I kind of bring out this type of sample budget because I want to advocate amongst writers to have that understanding, because often you guys. Some of you are aware, some of you aren't, because you're dealing with end product. But some people may not have involved in actual music production. And so when you see everyone's role within the overall economy of creative music production, you can see where advocacy in the writers community saying wow, we know what a struggle it is to do creative music. And that's even for labels. It's a little different scale, or whether it's indie productions, and we want to support creative music, and that maybe from that type of sensitivity, radio stations, writers will say give us the e-package. We understand. We want to support the music. We don't need the package. It's cluttering up our house anyway. That sort of thing. So that's.
Well, as Robert's saying, we're going to be without CDs in a matter of 2 to 5 years in any case. So you're not going to have to persuade journalists to get on bandwagon for that, because we're going to lose them, and whether we want them or not, they're basically not going to be there, I would think. I'm
sure it'll happen eventually.
Yeah, I'm going to try to change. I'm sorry, I have to change the screen over for a moment.
Sure.
Yeah, but I mean, we're very sympathetic. It definitely costs money to make your own CD. There's no doubt of that, and how you get recompense for that is really questionable. I mean, if you're selling the CDs off of the bandstand because there's so few retail stores, I guess you're able to cop the whole 12 or 15 or $10, whatever you're charging for it. And from your budget, now we've taken it away off the screen, but it seemed like you could save maybe $4,000 by not doing physical CDs. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. Yeah.
So you've got your 12,007 down to 8,007, and you're
That
still
helps.
those 1,000 CDs were all earmarked for promotion, right?
Right.
That
So
had
what that
nothing to do with
does
what you pressed for sales.
and so then what that does, it frees up the 400 that you're giving away for free. You get the income of those sales, and you probably then would have, if there was a service like what Robert's doing for radio for press, you reach a lot more people.
There will be.
Yeah, instead of
Well, I mean, this is the issue, though. I mean, from the journalist's point of view, I'm not interested in paying $30 a month so that I can check out things that I might want to review.
oh, I think he was charging the artists.
Right.
No, we only charge the artists. It's completely free for all radio professionals, broadcast professionals, and some of the things we're working on will be free for all press people, for magazines, trade journals, newspapers. And there's no charge for that. We only charge the artist $29.95 a month, which is very, very reasonable.
Right. One thing, Jason, in your budget that wasn't in your budget, which is incredibly important for any artist now, is website, your own personal website. We ask all of our artists to make sure that they have, before we start doing any outreach to press or radio outside, it's essential that every single artist has their own house in order, because whoever you reach out to, however you reach out to them, whether it's by CD and regular mail or whether it's by electronic, if they're interested slightly, they're going to want to come back and look at what you have on your website.
Right.
Be able quickly to read everything about you and maybe have some other sound samples for other records that you released that weren't what you just sent them. You're going to want to have, you need to have your own, everybody needs to have their own house in order, because one thing to keep in mind right now, everything is in flux. Everything is in flux. Whether everyone's been talking about, right now you've been talking about how many journalists will accept electronic promos. A lot of journalists I deal with, they won't accept electronic promos. Some people tell me that because they get so many electronic promos that the only thing they pay attention to or could organize are their physical CDs. Whatever, it's all changing. Things are moving gradually toward electronic, but we don't know how long that will take or how short that will take. The only thing you have any control about right now is your personal house. So every artist should get their website in order, put all the sound samples up that they possibly can in their, on their website, and then start looking out to see what they could do.
Robert, excuse me for a minute, Joyce. Robert, if somebody does that preclude them from having a need for Radio Submit?
If they do what?
If they have their own website in order, they've got their digital samples.
No. See, that's a fallacy that's been going on. And what's going on? We launched Radio Submit 6 years ago. There's some other sites that started up, some ex-employees of ours. They're popping up all over. But because we're delivering to radio, which, like Joyce, we have been working with radio for 15 years, building a database of contacts and relationships. The artists think for some reason they're going to build a website and just start emailing all the radio stations and they're going to get radio airplay. Well, I got news. There's so many doing that. They're inundating radio and journalists and everybody because they're getting hundreds and hundreds, and they're going, wait a minute, you know. So that's some of the appeal of Radio Submit, like a place like Radio Submit, is we contact our station list about every 40 days, maybe 30 to 40 days, one time, featuring several artists. We try not to get in radio's face too much with emails, like a lot what's going on now. It's getting out of hand, to be honest, and that's where we're hoping sites like ours are going to help with this, to bring everybody to one place, and you know, radio can go at their convenience instead
Robert, excuse me, I just was curious, like how in your database do you filter the search for music? For example, if it's rock, there's a lot of different types of rock music, there's a lot of different types of country, there's a lot of different types of jazz. Have you worked on, do you have any type of system in which someone looking for some specific type of programming could find music?
All our music is listed under the radio stations can browse by genre or state or the artist name or the album name, title, or the song title.
Okay.
I want to say one thing here. Radio Submit is really good, but it's the artists that are doing successfully on Radio Submit still have record promoters on team.
I would think.
They're still getting out and they're still promoting. So, you know, we've scared a lot of promoters that thought, well, we're going to be replaced by it. Well, no, we think promoters should embrace this. All Radio Submit is doing is delivering music to radio without having a CD involved. And the quality is exactly the same. If the radio station wants a lossless WAV file, we can sure give them one. But like I said, our demand from radio, we know that we tried that, and radio went to the MP3 320-bit rate, which is, you know, above what Clear Channel then broadcasts.
So I think that this problem with filtering, Jason, which you're interested in, you know, comes up that depending on how fine-grained, you know, the filtering is, it's like,
for example, you're saying some jazz critics don't want to review vocal CDs or something. So
well, that's a pretty, you know, gross distinction. I mean, it could be much more fine-grained than that. And it would depend on how good the information is that the artists were posting.
Right.
And I suppose if you're going to appeal to the journalists, how good the information is that the journalists are posting about what they accept or what they don't accept.
Well, like CD Baby actually has experimented with filters. So I get fairly good sales from CD Baby, and they have you fill out a questionnaire, like, you know, and of course I hate answering it because what was your music influenced by? Is it this type of music or these type of artists? And based on several reference points, then when someone clicks on, say, a Billy Bang CD, you know, it'll say you may also like, you know, Jason or any number of violinists, you know. So there's some of that going on in CD Baby, but I think, yeah, but I think we're talking about there's a powerful technology in front of us that we're in it's not being utilized yet, and I would argue that then, you know, a lot of music and music history itself is a story of access and gatekeepers. And, you know, there's always been a struggle of music and musicians, great musicians that I've known, you know, from the East Village who never got out, never got known, never had the resources to reach radio or to reach the press. So I would dare say, well, it's not a guess, it's a historical fact that often every era of creative history, there are figures that are missed. And I think once this technology is now employed in our area of the music in full force, in which those costs and the issue of access to a database doesn't mean that you have to have $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 for a publicist, you can access this, and it can be done efficiently for both sides, artists and reviewers, and some good music might come to you that you might not ever reach you otherwise.
I'm getting tons of questions here, and I'd like to get to a few of them. See, I haven't really been reading them in depth, so I'm going to just try to take them chronologically. Jason, do you depend, this comes from Mark Freed, do you depend the money earned on direct sales by you as the artist of a physical CD, physical distribution revenues, to make recording your music viable in an economic sense? Or could you make it work without a physical product for sales and promo packs for gigs, etc.? So do you need a physical product to sell?
I think to get, to set, when I correspond with a presenter, generally they want a physical CD. So it is a calling card, and I still think a lot of the press prefers physical CDs, and I understand it. I like a physical item. I love the LP. I loved holding it. I like looking at the artwork, and the CD also the same thing. So there's some type of tangible experience that's missing when you don't have a physical product. But if you have a CD and it is well packaged and well recorded, and you send it to a presenter, you definitely have an advantage over someone sending a CDR with no information and their name scrawled in marker on the top of it.
But you don't think that's also true for the journalist? If I get a nice package, you have an advantage over sending me.
I think presentation, but that's what I was interested in the type of e-packages Joyce was talking about, because those can be done very well or very poorly, right? And
right.
And if you make it easy for a journalist, like here's the music, here's the ideas, here's the personnel, and you get a package that's very efficient, informative, and aesthetic, I think that helps people take up their time to listen to your music, And I always appreciate, if people listen to my music, I'm always grateful, because that's what we do it for, So in answer to this question, I think as of now, the physical CD is still a very important medium. But I think our discussion now, we're a little ahead of the curve of society, and we're trying to anticipate and maybe promote certain changes in cultural practices that will help the survival of the music.
Another question from R.B. Frew. As a campus community station music director, I was happy CD singles never caught on. My fear is that Radio Submit and organizations like that will shift the world more towards singles. I realize it already is for some commercial stations. Robert, do you have a response to that one?
I think so, a little bit towards singles. It's just like if you go to iTunes now to buy music, you used to have to buy a CD. Now you can pay 99 cents and get any single off the CD you want. And I think radio's doing the same thing. Now, I actually encourage labels and artists and bands to present to radio like 3 songs. And the reason for that is if you give a radio station, like the man asking this question here, if you give them all 12 to 13, 14 of your songs, they're going to go through there and pick out the best 3 or 4. They're going to play those a lot, and then more than likely your album is over with in 3 months. If you feed those radio stations 3 songs at a time, you can extend that album life for up to a year or more, like some of the big stars. They always promote 1 single at a time. The album would be out there, but their promotion teams are pushing 1 single at a time so they can extend the life of that album for some of these artists 2 years.
Huh. That seems so, counter to the way that jazz generally works. Would you say, Jason?
Yeah, I think for most jazz musicians, we think of you know, the sequence and content of a CD is really important. It's part of, in a sense, a CD always has a quality of a suite instead of single pieces of music. But I've had people tell me that artists, maybe, you know, we can't dictate how people choose to listen. If people do want to just buy one tune from iTunes, and then now they have that option, and that's a good thing. And for the more curious who digest the music and want to understand exactly what's going on with a particular artist, the statement that they make, they'll have the whole thing. I mean, I have to make those choices. Say if I apply for a grant, they want one track, and then you have to make a selection of what people will listen to. And it always challenges me because I never can tell people to start in the middle of a piece, because that makes no sense to me, because the middle of the piece is the middle because of what preceded it, you know?
Right.
And also some music, you know, for grants, if the panel's taken 80 applications and they're going to listen to 3 minutes of your track, you're sort of aware of it because some music unfolds and develops at a slower pace than that.
Well, if anybody's, you know, you've been on panel, haven't you, judging things like that?
Yeah, and you listen.
And it never works. It never works. I mean, I've been on numerous panels, and if you don't have a grabber right at the beginning of your sample, forget it, because nobody's waiting. 30 seconds is a long time on those panels.
Yes,
and the hands shoot up like I've heard enough. So please, I urge people who are applying for grants to put something distinctive and vivid at the front of your sample, even if it's not the beginning of your song.
Yeah.
I've got a question. Am I describing part of the downside of the DIY revolution in that there's too much product, most of it of inferior quality and artistic merit, created that is literally impossible to keep track and stay on top of everything? And I would say that that's not really the way I view the amount of CDs that I get. I don't think I'm receiving more CDs for potential review these days than I did, say, 10 or 15 years ago. And I don't think that the quality has diminished. In fact, I think I'm receiving a lot of very good self-produced material. I think that what has diminished is the outlets, the paying outlets for me to be writing about materials. And also, I think because I'm getting old and losing brain cells, keeping track of things is not really that's what I'm losing, the ability to keep track of things. But I don't think that the DIY revolution has hurt us in terms of quality of music. I don't feel like I'm getting flooded with stuff. And this is one thing, though. If I get a digital, a pitch to listen to a digital sample, I don't really have anything to judge it on. The email that somebody sent me, like, is it grammatical? Is it spelled right? Did they spell my name right? But if I get something in the mail, I don't know, there's sort of a, you know, sense of this looks like a good one. And that can be just judging a CD by its cover, but sometimes it does really help to filter things out. Another question here. This is from Minchi Israel. And she says she's coming to this from the perspective of a Caribbean jazz blogger who's moving to jazz music reviews for online publication and to pitch Caribbean stations to play the music. What steps can she take to get on mailing lists for new and catalog recordings? Joyce, can you handle that?
Sure. We have, if somebody is interested in getting promos from us, we like to know, first of all, that they're real. So we ask if they've written things before where there are links online, if they could send us some links. And then depending on who they're writing for, we could send them easily an electronic promo. Jason, you asked what our electronic promos look like. We send initially an email, so we would send to this woman from Israel an email with the front cover of the CD in there and a photograph of the artist and a quick sample, one track, and then they would click through on another link in that same email to then download the entire album, which would have all of the artwork, the liner notes, our press release, and all the tracks. So it's currently our electronic promos, it's 2 steps. It's that one email and then a click through for the whole album. So for instance, this
That's
woman
on Bandcamp?
Yes, if this woman from Israel wrote, the first thing I would do is I would ask her about who she writes for, just the sort of thing she's writing about, because as I said, we have 370 releases out. They're not all jazz. I like to know where someone's head is, what sort of music they're interested in. And then when I know that, then we could easily, inexpensively send them an electronic promo. To send them a physical CD, it's more expensive. The mailing rates as of February 1st went through the roof for both. In the U.S. they went up, but they've more than doubled for overseas.
I should clarify that Minchi is not from Israel. She's from the Caribbean. Her name is
Okay, I'm
Minchi
sorry.
Israel, that's all. But that's okay. We understand. It is expensive, yes, for sure.
Yeah, so it's to send something overseas, a physical CD, it's much more expensive than it ever was before. So depending on what it was going to be used for, if someone was writing an article, they actually really did need the physical CD, then we would send it to them. But we could be much more generous with our electronic promos, which do have all the information that you need. And unfortunately, because we are an indie label, we have to watch how many physical CDs we actually ship out.
I think you should definitely be watching that. And by the way, when you mentioned that some critics are saying, well, we don't get any compensation except the CD you send us, that's not your responsibility.
No, it's
that's
not
the
our
responsibility of the publication.
Exactly. That's not our responsibility at all, and I should have clarified it, that they, and this is for smaller online webzines, that they do not get paid by the webzine for their writing. They simply write because they love the music, and yes, that's right. It's not our responsibility, but they're saying, you know, we don't get anything from this. At least if we have the CD, we're writing about the music because we love it. We would like to have the physical object.
Well, you would respond with the physical object if they could show you a published review of that electronic download, wouldn't you?
Sometimes because of the changing music industry, because postage rates are up so high, we can't always send the physical CD. We simply we don't have the budget to do that. Right now, what we're doing is and this is very general. If you're a print publication, then we try to work in kind that we send a physical CD and a printed press release, etc. If you're an electronic publication, then we hope that you'll accept electronic promos. That's very general. There are exceptions for different things, but we have to watch our budget, especially with the mailing prices these days.
Joyce, you'd said that you had a sample of the promo pack that you could show us on your screen.
I do. I'm going to show you what. Let's see. I need to.
Can you do that, Joanne?
Locate that. I'm going to show you 2 different things. One is the email that you would get saying that you are going to get a CD. So I'm going to show you this, and then I'm going to switch to another screen. So this is an example of an email that you would get. This is for Curtis Hasselbring. You would get an email showing you the front cover, a photo of Curtis, a quick stream of one song that's in the email, but then you would actually go to download the album And in that package, I'm going to stop showing this screen, and I'm going to look for the other sheet that I have. Okay, now I'm going to show you. This is what, if you downloaded that little link to get the whole album, you would get the cover of the album, MP3 of every song in the album, the artwork, our press release, liner notes. So it's not very exciting.
Bandcamp?
This is from Bandcamp, yes.
Ah, okay.
And the other thing I wanted to mention, what Robert, we were talking about, it's when I was mentioning about your website. Every artist should have a website set up with sound samples, but that's only part of the equation. Something that Robert's doing, that's the other part of the equation that you need. You need to send things out, and you need for people when they start coming in to be able to see what you have. So there are several things that you have to do.
Can I interject here just a second? We deal with a lot of genres in doing our roots charts, and we started doing jazz like 2 years ago, charting jazz radio airplay, and we normally have to go in and authorize once a week before we generate our charts to check spelling and things like that. The DJs enter our charts directly and enter all the information. And a lot of times we want to feature jazz artists and some of the things, so we go in there and look for them. And jazz is one of our toughest for finding websites for jazz artists in New York and places. I don't know what it is, but the jazz is the toughest for us to find online.
You can't find the artist's website?
Yes. A lot of jazz artists do not have websites still.
No, that's unusual. That's not my experience so far. Jason, do you think that...
I'll tell you one change I've noticed. It's kind of tangential as far as for websites. I know that at one point for musicians working in Europe, it was very difficult unless you had an agent, because you really didn't know who to contact, you didn't speak the language, and all that. And I noticed there's been like a shift there, that a lot of festival producers are starting to prefer direct contact from musicians, and if they want you, they find you on your website, and you know, they contact you, or if you write them, they prefer it because, and again, I think it's an economic thing. They're trying to take out the middle person of an agent that's going to have to add another 30% to a budget. And when you consider, you know, to bring an American musician over to Europe, it's going to cost them 3 to 4 times more than a European group. You got, you know, the travel and all that sort of stuff. And so fewer Americans go to Europe because if they're going to prioritize their budget and make a good festival, then you've got to have a brand. You have to have some celebrity and to draw, to justify spending that portion of the budget on you. So I think that, and with the economy of Europe being squeezed, that practice is starting to change. And so a lot of musicians, I think, you know, they know that what Joyce says, is that having your own house in order, that having a website is pretty fundamental.
Pretty crucial. Back to some of these other questions, Jessica Jones, who's a saxophonist in the New York area, says, some printers already using the digital download model. I had a website set up for that, but far fewer reviewers were interested in that than in getting a CD or LP. Maybe because, as some said, they consider that their pay. Do you think there'll be a change in the culture in the very near future? It seems like the reviewers hold the cards. You just can't say it's only available electronically, because then they won't review it. And I think we've discussed that the reviewers will have to go with the change in the culture. If the culture is all going electronic, the reviewers will do that too. It may be the old school reviewers want the CD or the LP, And I don't see how you can refuse somebody who asks you for it unless you know that they're not really a writer or not really going to do the work for you. I don't really think that very many of us are profiting, us being journalists, by having lots and lots and lots of CDs. I think that when I was a kid, I wanted to have the biggest record collection, but really it's falling in on me at this point. So I think my colleagues of my age are feeling the same way. There's just too much stuff. So I'm not asking for things. In fact, I got contacted by a band in Liverpool, and I wrote something nice about a video that they had. And they were all excited, oh, can we send you the CD? And I said, that's going to cost you $35. No, we really want to send you the CD. I said, can't you just send me the... They did send me the digital, and then they insisted on sending me the CD too, and I don't really know why. You know, it took a month and a half to get here. It was expensive to them, but now I've got it, so now I have to figure out what to do with it. A question for Joyce from Mark 3. Do you feel that writers' willingness to try out or use EBKs is largely influenced by your personal relationship with those writers? Joyce.
I think there's a lot of music out there. We were talking about DIY community, and I do think there's more music out there than ever, and I do think that a ton of it is high quality. We get, as a label, more music, more good music, demos sent to us, etc., than we could possibly release. Because of the volume of music, I think it's important for the people who are writing about the music or playing it on air. I think right now they need some sort, or it's helpful for them to have some sort of filter. And in some instances, I really do think that they understand that we are filters, that we've listened to however many hundreds of CDs a year, but we only release 15 or 16 per year. So part of it, I think the people who write about our music, they understand that that it's sort of pre-screened for them, that we've listened, we pulled out what, and we release what we think is the best. That's part of it. There are lots of writers out there that I don't know yet, that we're constantly reaching out to. There are some magazines, there are some writers that we may release something that I'm sure that if they listen to it, that they would like it and write about it, but we don't yet have relationships with them. They don't quite know the label yet, but we are trying to make new contacts. So does that help a little bit? So that yes, there are some people who know us as a label. There are some people who have dealt with us for years, and then there are people who we don't have the contacts yet set up with.
You know, the missing element, and I put it in only briefly, is the editor's responsibility in making assignments. In those cases where there are editors who are making assignments to freelancers or staff writers, if somebody calls me up and says, have you heard the new, and I want to say, yeah, I've heard it, so that I can have a conversation with them and maybe get an assignment. And I don't know what that new is until it comes into me. And if I say, well, no, I haven't heard it, and they can't send it to me, you know, my editor at National Public Radio, for instance, is not going to send me a digital download. I may, while I'm talking to him, go on YouTube and see if I can find a representation of the band so I can fake it that I've heard it. But we really don't know what we're going to get asked to write about, and I've often been caught being asked about something that I have a vague knowledge of, and I know if I go to my CD collection, or if I had it digitally, I could find it, but I don't know before I'm getting that request. Mark Free wanted to ask Robert, do you think that a one-time fee of $50 like Bandcamp does for digital distribution would be more artist-friendly and appropriate to the types of budgets that jazz records are made with? It's a tough question.
I don't think so. The reason is I said earlier, this week alone we had 19 new radio stations sign up. That's 19 more stations coming on board and downloading music. If you do a one-time thing, you're going to get out there once and that's it. And I've found that artists that stay on with us at least 3 months do very well. The artists that come on and they get on in 30 days, they're all disgusted because they got 4 radio stations. If they would have stayed on, they might have had 20, because every day we're bringing in new radio stations to discover their music. So I think a one-shot deal is fine, but you're not going to get as good a results, I don't think, as staying on for at least 3 months at a time for the new stations that come on board all the time. And like I said, we're worldwide, so from Africa to Australia, we're really big in Australia and Canada, and it's just growing exponentially, the downloads from those countries, because like Joyce was saying, the cost of is very expensive now to get your music over there. Mm-hmm. But I hope that answered that question. I'm not for sure.
I'm asked also by Mark Free, are the filtering concerns handled by a good press release or one sheet? And I would say that not really. I mean, a good press release shows me that you had a good writer write the press release. It doesn't really give me any indication what the music is. And I think that the people that Jason was talking about earlier, the people who in every era have been neglected, are the ones who really were not very gregarious, not good at outreach, not good at self-projection. And, like a Herbie Nichols, for instance, somebody who's a bit of an introvert, perhaps, doesn't have the writing skills, isn't as socialized. Those are the people who get ignored or overlooked. So I personally look for, I'm sorry?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
I just look for weird stuff. If it's weird, I don't care if it's got a one sheet at all. I'll give it some benefit of the doubt that somebody was strange enough to do something bizarre on their cover or, in some sort of representation that does not go for titles of bands. I don't care how weird your band title is. But, something that gives me a sense of what the aesthetic is of the music is useful to me. Also, I want to say Minchie is a boy, so I'm sorry about that, Mr. Israel. I had said that you were a lady. So Minchie Israel is a male. Anyway, you were going to say, Jason.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, definitely there's qualities as individuals have to advocate for their music. But I think then a lot of the ideas we're kicking around now is somehow using the power of the technology to lower the threshold of the simple costs of doing it. And the reason why I kind of brought up Robert Reich's quote about the economy, because I heard a talk of Adrian Ellis when he was still the executive over at Lincoln Center Jazz. And he started his talk saying that the economy is an obelisk now. There's a very small number of people from whom he can raise money to meet the cost of Lincoln Center Jazz. Now, the actual cost for this physical space of Lincoln Center Jazz is $1 million a year. He has to raise that just to keep the doors open and the electricity on. So he was always in this struggle to raise this money from a small amount of people. So we're talking about some of this technology. I think it's important to see the landscape of where we're at. When I started playing music in New York, there would be at least 15 concert series that paid concert budgets of $2,500 to $3,000. There was the Whitney Midtown, there was a Composers Forum, there was Dance Theater Workshop, there was the Alternative Museum, there was other, a number of spaces. Each of them produced maybe 12 to 15 concerts a year. And what young musicians don't understand, because as they never had that, it's all gone, and so it's just a lot of what we're talking about for some of these financial aspects, I think is the key to the survival of the music. And I think we have to speak to that, the upper 2% that Adrian Ellis reaches to. For example, the Doris Duke Foundation provides funds to Chamber Music America and stipulated that they, in addition to classical chamber music, they have to support jazz. And the action of that one single patron ensures that there's 15 high-quality recordings of this music produced a year because of their funding. So like one person can make a difference. So I'm just shooting this out over into the discussion in case anyone from the 2% is listening.
Well, it's become very peculiar, though, and we've worked with Doris Duke also, and I'm very grateful for the patronage they were able to provide for the Jazz Journalists Association's iJazz project, for instance. But we found that when we were trying to give them digital samples of the videos that were being produced, they didn't look at them. And they really were of an old culture themselves, although they're making stipulations about how we should be submitting materials online. They're not really looking at those online materials, so sometimes that happens.
Yeah.
R.B. Flew said that the reason, he asked the question about singles earlier, the reason singles being teased out doesn't work for us, his station, is that we rotate albums, not tracks. So after 6 months, it won't be reported as new, even if you just released the last single. So I don't think that really requires further comment exactly. Mark Free says, Howard, what about the middle ground? Digital online previews that press and radio can use, and if they want to write about it or play it on air, then they can request a physical copy. This seems to me to be quite reasonable.
Welcome to GoTar, web events made easy.
Attention span to get me to click on a link. And, Jason, I think you're rightfully concerned about the economies of cost for production. And my concern, because I don't have overhead that requires me to spend a lot of money to get my writing out, but it takes time, and that's, the element that I'm trying to marshal and be economical with. I don't think that digital downloads take longer. It's just that if I got 20 digital downloads this week with a note, cover email saying, listen to my download, please, I probably would not. I just don't know when I would find the time to, I'm going to browse through these now. If I get them in the mail, then I do at least have to open them up and shuffle them to see what they are, And it's tricky. I think that that's a transitional problem because I'm, the age I am, and not somebody who's really attuned to working in the digital modality all the time. Jason, are you finding that younger people are less responsive or more responsive when you make a pitch to them? Will you listen to my digital download? And are you doing that now? Are you pitching, trying to contact, or do you have a promotion person who's working it for you, saying, we have digital downloads, we want you to sample these?
I've followed a procedure similar to what Joyce outlined with emails, with links, and a photo, and then I followed it up. Sometimes people will request a physical CD. There are some places that I really want to get to, and I know people are getting inundated by a lot of requests. And if I don't get a response to an email, but I do think that festival is good for my music, then I will follow up and send a physical CD, and then you follow up with another email. I haven't gotten to the phone call stage, but that's as far as trying to get to be heard and noticed. I guess whether you're young or old, it takes a certain amount of persistence, and it takes a certain amount of luck, of timing, when people are open to programming, and luck never happens unless you're persistent. So, so what you're talking about, like how Herbie Nichols was, or something like that, I understand that too.
R.B. Frew writes again that he agrees of the advocacy necessity. And he says, I've used Radio Submit to download tracks, but I've been pointed there by artists or promo people. And it doesn't seem to me that we can get away from that. We need that middle ground person. There are many filters in place here, or directors, traffic cops, and they're all pointing us to different things. So I guess it depends who you as a consumer trust to guide you to where you think you want to go.
I think another word, in addition to filter, I think there is still a need for curators of some sort, that people are, whether it's a person, whether it's a company like Radio Submit, the middle person as a curator, as a filter, as a standard bearer, I think is still necessary these days, more than ever with the amount of music being produced.
I'll second that emotion. And
Howard, do you find that you respond more to a publicist contacting you than a musician directly, or how does that frame most journalists?
I'm kind of whimsical about when I'm contacted by a musician. If they're musicians I know and have relationships with, again, I feel more free to continue the relationship. Starting a new relationship with a musician who I don't know, who I haven't heard their music of, I mean, I do say, yes, I'll listen, and I try to get to that. It can sometimes become a lengthy process, and just doing the correspondence is, there's no upside for me because I can't sell the pieces usually. Publicists who I know well know what I cover. They pitch probably 9 things for every one that I can do anything with, but I am attentive to a handful of publicists who I know.
What do editors want from you?
What do you mean from me?
I mean, how do you know what to pitch to an editor? How?
Oh, that depends. Yeah. Well, I have to read their publications really carefully. I want to know what I want to write about that nobody else is writing about. I try to lead them a little bit. That doesn't always work. I mean, I've had a major jazz magazine tell me that we guys in New York think that we really know what's happening, and he's in Elmhurst, Illinois. For gosh sakes, he knows what's happening. It's a little weird. You have to kind of suss them out. If I were to pitch cold, or what I would suggest to younger journalists who don't have my kind of reputation or accomplishments to point to, is to reach out to a editor, say, this seems like something you should be covering, but I haven't seen it there yet, and give them 3 ideas that seem really appropriate for that publication. And that can be a lot of imaginative work goes into that, trying to suss out. You don't know these people often. You haven't had contact with them. The only thing you know about them is their projection through the magazine. A monthly magazine that has a 3-month lead time, you don't know what's already in the can. So for a freelancer to suggest something, it may be all a done deal already, and you don't know about it. You're just wasting your time. If you can get them on the phone and try to learn what their tastes are, these editors, that's better. Really the way you can judge is by listening to their radio projections or reading the magazine and see what they're interested in. And, you know, it's only when you try to say, look, you're not covering a whole scene. This is really happening. And you've got readers who will be interested in it. This is like the stuff that you're doing, only it's a little different. Give it a shot. And you have to be persuasive and be able to show them. You've got to be able to write a better one-sheet than any one-sheet writer.
And Robert, can I ask you something about internet radio? Has there been a significant rise of internet radio for your service?
Absolutely. We were charting internet mixed with AM/FM for a while in our roots chart, so now we've actually had to separate those because we're getting so many internet radio stations coming in now, launching, and they're in the U.S. though. To be honest, the big boys, iHeart, and some of those, they have huge audiences, Pandora and all that, but the small stations, they don't have a big audience yet, and I think some of that could be the internet quality. They're usually broadcasting real low bit rate because of bandwidth here in the United States. Now overseas in Europe and other countries, especially throughout Europe, internet's really growing fast, and internet radio is becoming very competitive with broadcast radio because of the listenership is you know, much better over there, and that's because, you know, they have fiber optic over there, and their internet speeds are much faster than the United States. So it's easier. They can broadcast a lot higher bit rate and better quality music, to be honest, on the internet than what's being broadcast here, I think is the reason. But no, internet's then again, I talked about CDs. Internet's a big part of the future of music and labels and artists, and all of us are going to have to contend with how are we going to, you know, create a market in this with so many out there. You know, you can launch an internet radio station now for $90 a month, and you're on the air. And I've actually, something bad about that is the fact that right now I've noticed that a few record labels are going out and buying and putting on 20 or 30 internet radio stations and then turn around and reporting the charts because they're labels or record promoters, and they're playing their artist on all those internet radio stations. And it's a bit confusing as far as internet right now, I think.
We're going to have to wrap this up. I will say Mark Free asked one more question. Still trying to find the middle ground. How about a physical postcard with the cover art on one side that I could shuffle through with the download link on it that I could type in if I were intrigued? Yes, I get those also, and yes, I shuffle through them. And, you know, they say it takes like 7 exposures to really stick in the mind. And it may be that you know, if I shuffle through a piece of paper 7th time, then I would say, okay, I'm going to type this in and check it out. I think that probably all projections of any way that you can get to journalists is a good thing to try. And I don't say that you should spend a lot of money doing it. If you can do it economically, it's definitely going to cut your bottom line if you're a do-it-yourself musician producer. And I think that we have to be responsible to that. I think most journalists are not trying to bankrupt musicians. You know, we're not trying to bankrupt labels. We're not really making any money on selling used CDs. There's not a big market for it. We're happy to see experiments succeed, you know, like Radio Submit. If these are the successful ways of navigating this new landscape, we want to be in on it. So please keep your postcards, letters, CDs, files coming, and I'm going to listen to as much of it as I can. Thanks so much, Jason. Thanks so much, Joyce, and also Robert, for a good webinar. Thank everybody who attended, and we have another webinar tomorrow night, actually, on jazz activism and City Hall for people who are involved with the Jazz April media campaign. If you don't know about the Jazz April media campaign, it's the JJA's really big show right now. Go to www.jazzapril.com, learn how you can promote your activities in your media, local media, in conjunction with Jazz Appreciation Month, which is April, culminating in International Jazz Day, April 30th. We've got a lot of suggestions at www.jazzapril.com. Again, thanks everybody for participating. Joyce, Jason, Robert.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For having us.
Thank you, Howard. Love the reviews.
Very good. Good night.
All right, good night.